Here's part one of what really happened on 9/11, and disclaimer for the fact checkers, this is a conspiracy theory, not fact. Let me start by saying steel melts at 2,750 degrees. Plain fuel burns at 1,517 degrees. John Skilling, head structural engineer for the World Trade Center, said that we looked at every possible thing we could think of that could happen to the buildings, even to the extent of a plane hitting the side. Physicist Stephen Jones is one of 9 authors, including nanochemists and professors, on a paper published in the peer-reviewed Open Chemical Physics journal. This is what they found in their analysis of the 9/11 dust. Red-gray chips, averaging in size between 0.2 and 3 millimeters, were found in all 4 dust samples. The red layer of the chips contained a highly energetic form of thermite. If you don't know, highly energetic thermite is explosive. He says there is no benign explanation for the thermite found in the dust. That same physicist made headlines in 2005 when he argued that the rapid and symmetrical fall of the World Trade Center looked like the result of pre-positioned explosives. He argued that the fires alone would not have been enough to crumble the buildings, and that even if struck by planes, the tower should have been strong enough to support the weight of the tops as they crumbled, unless they were leveled by explosives. Shortly after, he was labeled a conspiracy theorist and stripped of his position as a professor at BYU. Remember, these conspiracy theorists are physicists and nanochemists who conducted unbiased research without an agenda to come to these conclusions. Okay, I'm out of time, so follow for part 2. Okay, this is part 2 of what really happened on 9/11, and disclaimer for the politically biased fact checkers, this is a conspiracy theory. Building 7 also fell on that day, and it very obviously looks like a controlled demolition. Here's a picture of the moment the explosives went off in unison, and here's the video. And then there's this. At 5 p.m. on the afternoon of September 11, 2001, the BBC aired a live broadcast about the collapse of Building 7. After introducing the topic, the anchor interviewed reporter Jane Stanley at her base in New York, who described how the building had fallen. Halfway through the interview, the video link was suddenly lost. That was convenient, really, because at the time of the airing of the report, Building 7 had not fallen at all. In fact, it would not fall for another 23 minutes, and it can clearly be seen to the top right of Stanley as she conducts the interviews. Pentagon was also hit that day, which just so happened to be the day after Donald Rumsfeld held a press conference stating that the Pentagon was missing $2.3 trillion. There was also a lot of predictive programming leading up to 9/11. And we can't forget about the Illuminati card game, which came out in 1995, 6 years before the 9/11 attacks. Here are 2 of the cards from the deck. You either have to believe in time travel or come to terms with the fact that this stuff is planned. My money's on the latter. I'm out of time, follow for part 3. Okay, this is part 3 of what really happened on 9/11. The idea for the World Trade Center first debuted at the 1939 World's Fair. 7 years later, one of the exhibit's organizers, Winthrop Aldrich, headed a new state agency with the goal of creating a permanent trade exposition in New York. Winthrop Aldrich is the son of Nelson Aldrich, who represented the Rockefellers at Jekyll Island during the creation of the Fed. Winthrop Aldrich's nephew, David Rockefeller, established the Downtown Lower Manhattan Association in 1958 to remake Lower Manhattan. Rockefellers Association put forth the plan for the development and the location of the World Trade Center. Fast forward to the 90s, and George Pataki is running his campaign on cutting costs, which included privatizing the World Trade Center. So the Port Authority decided to open a 99-year lease to competitive bidding. Larry Silverstein of Silverstein Properties became the new leaseholder in July of 2001, just 6 weeks before the attacks. He then upped his insurance plan to include terrorism. Larry Silverstein has stated that he usually spent his mornings in meetings in the North Tower. However, on the morning of September 11, 2001, he was conveniently at a medical appointment. After the attacks, Silverstein contended that each crash should be considered a separate event, allowing him to collect the maximum from the insurers up to $7 billion. In the end, he was awarded $4.5 billion from the insurance companies and tried to sue the airlines for another $12.3 million. We were then launched into the war on terror, and we know who profits from war. This is part